Kia ora whanau, and welcome to Dunedin's Multiethnic Council's Race Relation Week 2022. Marhaba, salam alaikum, befarmaid. Welcome to Masif, welcome to in Chinese, how do you say welcome in Chinese? Let me think. Ni hao, ni mangolai. What other languages can I think of? Can't think of. Kerakoto, perfect. Now, everybody, welcome to our studio here, and we're doing a live stream this time. We can't do the thing we did last year because of COVID, so we have some friends here in the audience, and check it out. Do you want to show our friends here that are sitting here? Yes, we have different people, friends from all around the world, and. Yes. Can you guys tell me any words of how to say hello in your language? James? Wanakam. Very good. Lovely. Now, wanakam, everybody. Dunedin Race Relations Week 2022 for the Multiethnic Council. So can I get a big clap? A big clap. Very big clap. All right. So the first up on the list, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the karakia. And we're going to welcome Miss Emma Keisha. She's going to do a lovely karakia for us. And I'll give some info about our lovely guest. Miss Emma is a founding member, Misa Emma. Misa Emma is a founding member of the Dunedin Multiethnic Council. She is a master weaver and has represented New Zealand at numerous art events. She has worked continuously for over 35 years to build organizations in weaving and the arts and to support Pacific community events throughout New Zealand. She was a member of Creative New Zealand's Pacific Islands Arts Committee from 1992 to 1995 and has been an exhibitor, mentor, and teacher for the Ministry of Youth, Sport, and Cultural Affairs in Samoa. She was a member of the Pacific People's Trust Board from 1998 to 2008. And since 1981, she has been a church leader and coordinator at the Women's Ministry for the Dunedin Seventh-day Adventist Church. So without further ado, Ms. Keisha.
Thank you for inviting me to say our prayer. First of all, we must always thank God before we do anything in life. I will say the prayer in my own language, which is Samoan. Whawhitai le mātou atua, I loa lofa, ma loa ngalele ia te mātou. Wa e au maia I mātou umai nei aso. Mātou te tāpuai. Ma whaia mea mātou te whia whaataunu uina I nei aso. Mātou te vi ia oe le mātou atua I taimi uma lava. Whawhitai le au maia I mātou manai o mātou ainga. Ina ia mātou vivi ia te oe. Ma avatu ia te oe le whawhitai. Awa wa e to e whaolaina mai mātou nei aso. Mai le mātou moe ana pō. Sa ia o mai lava le nei aso. Whawhetai lava le atua. I lo wanga le lei. Whaamanuia ia I mātou uma lava o I lalo ifo le nei whale. Ia mātou maua le whianga le le iai. Ia mātou maua le ono sai. Ma le whaamangaloa I ma le whaapalepale. Ina ia mātou avatu le vi inga ia te oe. E whaavavau lava. O le mātou vi inga lea ma le whawhitai Jesu. Whaamole mole ia e alofa ma ia e talia mai mātou. Ona o lau suafa, pele wa mātou wole mwala awa tuai nei. Amen.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for that, Misa. That was. Do you want to tell us what that meant? The prayer. What is the meaning?
Meaning that whatever we plan to do in this life, we cannot go without asking God and thanking Him for bringing us together, like was make it possible for us to come in our car. Anything can happen, but He kept us safe until we come to this place and see each other in His blessings.
Lovely.
To forgive us for any wrongdoing that we do.
We all have heaps.
Yes.
I know, because as a father, I'm constantly telling my kids to behave.
That's right. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Misa. Please, you're welcome to join me. I wanted to ask you one more question. You know, um, so I was thinking, when you walk into a garden, for example, the botanical gardens, imagine if all the gardens inside the garden was only one type of flower. Imagine only one rose flower. Imagine only one color and one smell. It look nice, but after you go 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, you still feel the same excitement, or you get bored after 1 week?
Well, it would be very boring. Just like you see one person, but when everyone comes from a different color of their dresses and clothing, it's very nice.
So is what you're saying is that people are also like flowers on the earth, because we all have. So if imagine if everybody just Samoan, right, or everybody just Persian like me, or everybody Indian or Chinese or Sri Lankan only, or if we go to a garden only roses, we get bored, right? So it's nice to have different color, different shape, different smell.
Yes,
So what you're saying is the diversity of all these people creates a very rich experience for all of us.
that's right. My husband was an Indian from India, and we met in 1960. In those days, it was very unusual for a Samoan woman to marry an Indian husband. But I think we were the first to marry each other those days. And my family didn't like it. But as I got used to my husband, he's got very caring ways and loving, and I fell for that. So
And now you have one, and now you have wonderful children from two different ethnic backgrounds.
that's right.
How beautiful is that?
I really enjoying having my family.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's Miss Akisha. A very big clap for her. Thank you so much. Very good. So, next up, we've got a big thank you to our sponsors. Peter, are you going to come and help me say thanks to our sponsors? Cool.
By the way, we're streaming live from Toitu Museum in Dunedin. So if, wherever you are, that's where we are at the moment. Our sponsors,
Yeah. So who we got so far? We got the council, city council.
Dunedin City Council.
Yeah. And we also have big clap for the city council. City council, thank you, city council. Who else have we got? We've got Toitu. Look at this wonderful
Yep,
place we're in.
Toitu Museum.
Yeah, big clap for Toitu. Lovely, thank you, Toitu. New Zealand Human Rights.
Yep.
Yeah.
Human Rights Commission.
So that's pretty important. I mean, we can't get very far without human rights, can we?
True.
Right. And last but not least, big clap for
Thank
New Zealand
you.
Human Rights. Very big clap. And last but not least, Hitaka Trust.
Also got a shout out. Yeah, big clap for them. Also a shout out to the Dunedin Multiethnic Council, which we're on the
That's
we're
you
on the
guys here.
committee. Yeah, with a big shout out to Lux, the president, for helping this event go ahead. So, the panel. You can tell us who the panel are, Eshcom.
All right, guys. So now we're going to a very, very exciting bit. We're going to our panel. Now, our panel is composed of several people. We have. Oh, I'm coming over here. No, don't go there. So I'm following the director. Director says to do this, I shall do. Hand over to the panel. Lovely. Okay. Well, I will hand over to the panel, and the panel will take it on from here. Would you like me to introduce you first? We'll introduce the panel. Okay. Well, that would be great. Very good. All right. So, I'll stand here while I introduce the guests. How's that? Now, we have our guests tuned in live online on this wonderful gizmo right in front of us right here. Now, who are our guests? We have 4 VIPs, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 very important persons. And they are, number 1, Professor David Murdoch, who is serving as Vice Chancellor at the University of Otago. Secondly, we have Commissioner Meng Foon as our Race Relations Commissioner. Thirdly, for the Ministry of Ethnic Communities. And last but not least, the Honourable MP Ingrid Leary for our Labour Party for Dunedin South. Excellent. All right. Now, we've got our DMAC and youth panelists here as well. So, Renisha, your name is Renisha Chand, and you are from Fiji. That's wonderful. That's very exciting. That adds an extra layer of diversity to this wonderful get together today. And you're serving as youth coordinator for the Dunedin Multiethnic Council. Very good. Do you want to tell me something about that?
It's a pretty impressive job to be in. I get to work with our young people, not just from the mainstream community, but also our diverse little bubble. So all the migrants, refugees, international students, Pacifica community, our Māori community. I get to sometimes have a meeting with them, sometimes just talk about where they're going in life and just learn from their experiences. And I think it's really humbling thing to be a part of. So yeah.
Lovely. All right. Let's give a big clap for Renisha. Now, secondly, we have Max Gillies. And you are serving as secretary for the Dunedin Multiethnic Council. Max, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Ashcon. Well, I've been a member of, part of the executive of Dunedin Multiethnic Council for now 3 weeks. And it certainly hit the ground running. I think what has really blown me away is the amount of work that's being done to represent all the ethnic communities in Dunedin. So it's a privilege and a pleasure to be part of the live stream today, and we look forward to asking the VIP panel guests several questions about topical issues and about infrastructure. Looking forward to that.
Lovely. Now, Max, before we get into the next part of our session, where are you from?
I'm from Jersey in the Channel Islands.
Where is the Channel Islands?
It's in the English Channel, about 25 kilometers off the coast of France.
Wow.
So get up in the morning, have breakfast in France if you wanted, come back and have dinner in Jersey.
Lovely.
So if those of you who've watched Bergerac, it's Bergerac country.
Lovely. That adds another layer of diversity to this wonderful human garden. Thank you, Max, for being with us. Lovely. All right, guys. Now we're going to pass it on to our lovely Renisha and Max to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I see all our panelists have joined us. Really, really excited to ask a couple of questions. But firstly, thank you to Ashcon, Peter, for kicking us off with such an epic introduction. So without further ado, let's get into question one. And these questions are kind of something that the team and I have sat down and chat about what would be the best way to go about, asking such amazing leaders questions in the position that they are currently. So the first question is, what collective actions can community leaders like yourself take to ensure the flourishing of our interwoven communities? So I'm opening the floor to anyone to pick this question up and start answering. Yep,
Kia ora, everyone. How are you? I'm from sunny Gisborne. It's a bit wet here at the moment, and we've got a power cut. So my apologies for being late, but thank you, Misha, for the karakia o te ata nei, e me ki wāpi nei mihi no te tairāwhiti ki a koutou. I think one of the things, I'll just mention one thing. One of the things that communities can do, sorry, I know I've got no teeth. Terrible, isn't it? One of the things that communities can do is actually connect with their schools. I find from the few incidences at schools at the present time, they don't really know who their community are. And reaching out to the principals and to the school teachers or your class teachers is very important to actually form that network and that can have that community support and that relationship between the school and the community. Because as we go forward with the advent of learning New Zealand history and the multiculturalness of our nation going forward, our schools need to know who their communities are, and we as a community need to be proactive. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Meng. I saw Richard putting his hand up.
Thank you. Nami nui kia koutou katoa. First of all, thank you very much for inviting us all to be part of this. I just really want to acknowledge, it's a wonderful week, it's a great day, and this is a great type of event to have. And actually, this is the second time today that me and Meng have been on a little virtual hui, so it's fantastic. And Meng, you don't ever want to let people know that HRC has no teeth. That's a joke. That's a joke. Because I've seen your teeth, mate, and they're good. All right. With regards to this question, I think there's a few words in here that I really, really like. That when I think about them together, well, actually, there's 4 words that really speak out to me: the collective actions, there's the interwoven communities, and then there's the flourishing, and then there's community leaders. So if I could just sort of speak to those for a moment. That idea of interwoven communities, I think, is really important because it's that idea of everything kind of working together and being connected. And I've been thinking quite a lot about the role that different parts of society play, whether it's like parts like I'm part of, which is the public service or government, the part of organisations like the Multiethnic Council, and the role you play in civil society. Then there's the actual communities and the people in the communities together. And there's even business. And really, to develop a really flourishing community, and it has to be interwoven, it has to interweave all these different parts where we all play different roles, and we know the different roles we can play, and we know how to play together. And so, these collective actions, I don't think ever come from just one organisation or one part of society. They come from us playing them together actively and at the same time. And I was always reminded of I think it's a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. I'd like to believe that's true. It's become less true as we've moved away from villages and small communities to these large metropolises, but I still think it's really true. And I'm going to sort of wondering what, kind of in the current world, what would it take to create a thriving society here in Aotearoa New Zealand? What are the different parts of our big village that need to work together? Just to finish, I think it comes back to that word around community leaders, and those community leaders are actually in the communities, they're in organisations like yourselves, they can be in institutions like mine. And I think we do have a role to play, which is speaking up and role modelling and bringing together people into safe places to talk and share, not what's just going wrong and how they can be fixed. I mean, that's on the negative side, but actually sharing their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations for the type of society here in New Zealand that we want to create. And I think dreaming about stuff is probably as important as complaining about it. In fact, I think it's probably even more important, and I wish we did more of that. Better let someone else speak. Okay.
Thank you, Richard. Can I get Dr. David, our VC, maybe, to get us going?
Pleasure. Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for providing this wonderful forum and inviting me along. This is actually I've been in my job, I was reflecting on Max for a few weeks. I'm about 2 weeks longer than you are. And so this is, although Dunedin's very familiar to me, having been born here, I've been away for a very long time, but wonderful to be part of this. Many of my comments are actually very similar to, I've got Meng's and Richard's, and I think the opportunity for all the community leaders to be there as a unified voice and share unified values is pretty critical. And then how we actually keep engaged with the community collectively and have that shared voice. I'd like to introduce a term that we have used a lot. Certainly in my background, I'm actually a doctor by background, and certainly in the health area and health education, health professional education. But this extends to universities and other public institutions, the idea of social accountability. and a little different from social responsibility in terms of it almost takes it up another level. It says you are obliged really to respond to you're responsive to the community you serve. And so as a public institution, that's really quite critical. And again, if that's a collective with other leaders in the community. So I think that's, added into the other comments already. I think we need to have that unified word, maximizing opportunities to work together, maximizing opportunities to, as Richard said, with the good things, with some of the problems and the complex issues as well. And I think we see plenty of those. So thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Can I potentially get Ingrid to give us a few words? You're mute, Ingrid.
Gosh,
Thank you.
thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa, noa and assalamu alaikum. Look, I agree with the comments that others have made. I feel I'll speak very much, I guess, as a politician and sitting on ethnic caucus about the responsibilities that I see us in the political sphere, and I think it goes for any leaders that are in sort of mainstream leadership roles. I think that we have a duty and a responsibility to acknowledge that we are operating in a dominant culture environment, and in acknowledging that, it's really important that we make the space and proactively seek the voices and representation of those who are not from those dominant cultures. So that's something that I think we need to do from every action, whether it's within our own political parties or through to in local government, central government, is really being mindful who is sitting at the table and taking those actions to get other voices to the table if they seem to be missing. The second thing I think is just around a really cool term that a woman called Julia Middleton speaks about in a book that she wrote, and I had the privilege of seeing her speak a few years ago. She talks about core and flex, and I think individually as leaders or just as people, it's really good to become culturally aware by asking yourself, what are your core values and where can you flex a little bit? And this changes over time. But what it means is that when we know what our core is and what our flex is, where we might be prepared to think differently or behave differently in different spaces, it gives us a background of cultural awareness that gives us the confidence to move into spaces where we may not be in the dominant culture. So an example might be Julia herself spoke about it. She was asked to give a talk somewhere in the Middle East, and she was required to wear a hijab, and she was grappling with how she felt about that as a self-professed feminist woman. And her daughters basically sort of reflected to her and said, well, Mum, is the hijab part of your core or part of your flex? And she realized it was part of her flex, so it was okay for her to be able to do that and to be comfortable with that in that environment. So that's an example of core and flex, which I think is really useful. The last point I would make is just around curiosity. I think that getting those interwoven layers that have been referred to happens as a result of people being curious about each other. So I think that even though race relations can be a very heavy topic and a very serious topic, if we can go into it with a sense of curiosity and optimism, it is like the flower garden that we heard about before. Life is so much richer, and the journey never finishes, because none of us have the definitive answer on how how the world is. We only have it from our own perspective. So bringing curiosity to the conversation, I think, is a really playful way of engaging with other cultures and other people and making this an enjoyable journey rather than necessarily a big heavy topic, although at times it can seem like that.
Thank you so much. I think there are very good couple of points that have been pointed out by each one of you, but I have some supplementary question, or let's say follow-up questions, and I have two for one for Richard and then one for Meng. So I'm going to start with Richard. This is more going into sort of like the logistical side and more of like how things will look like because we've talked quite a bit about, holistically what we would like to see happen as a community, as an ethnic community, for our community leaders, all of that conversation. But I want to explore more of what this conversation would look like when we look at the Ministry of Ethnic Communities strategic plan of action. So which strategic goal 4 talks about empowering and ensuring the flourishing of ethnic communities. So pretty much what we have talked about. But we're also aware of incidents like what has happened at Otago Girls High School with the hijab incident, as well as recently Dr. Darren Russell from the University of Otago has submitted a review of some of the internalized incidents that has happened regarding racism and discrimination. So my question to you, Richard, is how can the ministry take the report and what has happened at Otago Girls as an opportunity to develop frameworks for school and tertiary institutes? I think we're looking at, the reporter was looking at developing or taking on top, and I think maybe David can talk to this a little bit later as well, but looking at how, frameworks, when they were taken, how can ethnic frameworks be also incorporated for this? So so Richard, if there's any sort of comments, and then we can do a follow-up with David maybe.
Okay, there was a lot in that question.
Definitely there was.
Okay, I can handle that. And you asked specifically what my ministry, which is the ministry, I'll point this out, it's Ministry for Ethnic Communities, and I think it's quite intentional that there's a "for" in there, because we exist to speak up for, to assist, to facilitate, to advocate on behalf of the many different ethnic communities around our motu. I'll share with you, though, something before I answer that question, which is kind of part of the dream I have and the hope that I have is, and I've shared this with a lot of people, and they might think I'm a bit crazy, especially since I've only just joined the ministry, but I wish that my ministry didn't exist and it didn't need to exist. And I hope that one day I live in a New Zealand where it doesn't have to exist, because it is such a natural and integral part of what it is to be a Kiwi in Aotearoa New Zealand, that we accept diversity and we are inclusive, and actually, we absolutely celebrate difference and ethnicity and actually all sorts of diversity, but it's just a natural thing. We're a long way away from that, so I guess I've got some work to do. And with regard to your particular question around the high school, Otago High School, I think it is, and the university, I'm not entirely sure that our ministry has a specific role to play in just pushing out a framework for those organisations. I see our role as actually partnering with the particular communities in those spaces, and I don't just mean the communities of people that go to those educational institutions, but actually the communities of the education sector and the systems that they're part of, to help them develop the frameworks that work in those domains. Just like I wouldn't be putting out a framework to assist clinical care workers in hospitals, because that's not the area that we specialise in. And an example of the Otago High School incident, I know that some of my engagement advisors were very aware of some absolutely fantastic guidelines and materials that the Human Rights Commission have actually put out. So sometimes it's about brokering and bringing together some really good practice and knowledge and wisdom that's out there, and parties and community leaders, and bringing them together around a problem, and not ever assuming that we have the answers to it, because the chances of that are probably quite slim. So, we want to actually bring forward partners who know how to work in education, but actually maybe understand the human rights space, and can give us some guidelines around things like combating Islamophobia, or improving relationships between different types of communities.
Thank you so much, Richard. Before I move on to me again, follow up on the question that I asked Richard. Did David have something to say to this?
And, maybe some of that can be part of question 2, I guess, in terms of the actual actions. But I think the points, certainly, the reflection on our situation with the University of Otago, it was a key instant that has obviously provoked action. But of course, this is not new. And it's actually, I think, the key thing is actually the recognition and the acknowledgement of the issue of racism and discrimination. And this is, a vehicle, I guess, to move. So yes, there'll be multiple frameworks that can be utilised, and a framework around, to be built around this. It's certainly a program of activity, but I'm happy to elaborate on that later. I think maybe it's a question to all now, depending on how you would like to take it.
Thank you, David. For Meng, I think just following up what just Richard has said regarding some excellent resource already being available to dismantle some of the conversations around racism and discrimination in our structures, how can a non-government entity, the Human Rights Commission, play a role, or how has it been playing a role between Education Institute and various ethnic ministries to hold organization accountable for their promised action?
Yeah, can I just say, a light bulb and my teeth in my mouth is not working. I thought I might go and make myself look better. Can I just say congratulations, David, for filling in the role of Vice Chancellor at Otago University. I have a frequent meeting with your Chancellor, Royden. There are a number of strings in our bow. We do have information that's available for organisations, whether NGOs, government, universities, businesses. But also, we do have the opportunity to actually create guidelines where there are gaps. We at the present time are working with very closely with Ingrid, your local MP, in terms of culture and culture and uniform. And so that guideline will come out hopefully soon, which is actually at the printers. We're just finding a mutual day to launch it in Otago, and we hope that you all come along. There's guidelines that we're making in terms of when there are difficult conversations or difficult meetings to be held. What is a good process to actually hold a meeting like that, where there's a very hot topic, whether it's racism, assault, disrespect, desecration, or something like that in the community, and how do we actually hold those forums, and what are some guidelines towards that? We're also making a new guideline for schools and communities. How do they connect with tangata mana whenua? That was a question posed to us by Multiethnic Councils Dunedin, and we said, look, we'll talk to Ngai Tahu and we'll create a guideline for that. At the end of the day, you can have all these strategies and frameworks and policies. It all just takes action. The easiest thing to solve a lot of things and to create harmonious communities is actually just ring up and have a cup of tea. Just make a time and say, look, can we just have a cup of tea and just chat about a few things? Getting to know each other, who the leaders are, how do we motivate the community, how do we engage with the community, all aspects of good relationships, and just think about dating. As much as it is sometimes difficult to find the right date, but you've got to start from somewhere, and it all starts with a bit of a conversation, a cup of tea, and so it goes on, and then that relationship actually builds closer as time goes on. How we hold the organisations to account? Well, we've got to be mindful of the fact that we don't actually vilify and and cause the people that have caused the naughtiness to actually become victims as well. Sometimes we have a quiet conversation with them, but if it ends up in the paper, that is accountable enough because everybody knows, and we'll go and contact the parties and see how we can help engage. I mean, a lot of organisations do have support networks out there already. I think if you do have processes in an organisation, make sure the organisation people are familiar with them and they actually follow them. People can actually ring or call the email the info line at the Human Rights Commission and lay their complaints there. And we've got a team that will investigate and talk to people involved in the issues that are brought to our table. And there's many. So there are just some of the things that we do, team.
Thank you. I think that was the end of our first segment, actually.
If you don't mind, Renisha, I've got some follow-up questions. I've got to go ahead. I just wanted to go back on some of the things that that you've shared, and this is a discussion. So feel free if you've got questions to ask of each other. Feel free to engage crosswise and not kind of come back to us to be able to ask the questions. I think what I wanted just to point out was that initially when we talked about the setup for today was that this was the youth who were asking the questions, and Renisha can well represent the youth, and I'm delighted to be part of this segment as a member of the youth, but I think that ship has sailed for me. But let me just ask you the question about if we're representing the youth in our questions here. What can you say to the youth about ensuring the flourishing of our interwoven communities? Because, of course, we're talking about the youth's futures. So in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, what can you do the youth can actually measure and see that you've made an impact?
Is it directed at me?
Well, anybody who wants
Max.
to pick up that feather.
Yeah. I'll just be one component of that and other people can add. I want youth to feel that they are very proud and confident of who they are. And if you look at Māoridom in terms of the young people now, their whakapapa, their tātai hononga, their strings and their mountains and their rivers and their marae and their language and culture is the one that makes them stand tall. And I want all our youth to actually stand tall in Aotearoa.
I could follow on from Meng just to say, for me, if I look at the census data from 2018, you've got something like 42% of people in Auckland were born overseas. In Otago, it's around 22%. When I've been at diversity conferences in Auckland, a lot of the young people have said, kind of, what are you talking about? We don't have an issue with each other. So for me, a lot of what we need to address is the structural racism. I think as young people, as we become more and more diverse, a lot of the things that are perceived as issues disappear because those voices are at the table, but it's the structural impediments and racism that still stands in the way of people, and that's what I'm really interested in. And having said that, we've talked, some of the previous questions have been about rules, but actually I think we're wanting to get to a place where we're talking about a culture of inclusion, because you can't do it through rules. It needs to come from people. So how do we create a culture of inclusion, which is a much more difficult proposition, I think, than just being able to have rules and make people accountable, although people still do need to be accountable when they have been racist. So one of the things I was asked after the hijab case was whether there was Islamophobia in Dunedin, and if there was a problem, how big was it? And my view is that if anyone says there is a problem, then there is a problem because they feel there's a problem. And the other point to that is that if I go out for a run and I say, look, I'm already really fit, there's nowhere for me to grow. But if I can take on that there, you know, that I've got beginner's mind and I'm not that fit, there's a lot I can achieve. And I think that's what we need to do when we're looking at these big questions, is we need to be brave and say there is structural racism, there are impediments, there are assumptions all over the place, and just acknowledge that, because then we can grow as a society. So what I've said is quite theoretical, but I think those are just things to bear in mind, that there aren't truths out there or definitive answers, but how we frame these questions has a lot to do with how much progress we can make for our young people.
That kind of gets back to what you were saying before earlier, Ingrid, about us having curiosity as part of our mindset. And if anything I've learned from my children is they are inherently and intrinsically curious until, dare I say it, our education system, or me as a parent, bashes that out of them figuratively. And we, you know, tell them, no, there are rules, there's norms within society that you have to operate within. And if anything, that creates quite a lot of shaming when they just want to ask questions. And something Meng brought up before regarding, you know, yeah, we need to call out when bad behavior is done, but not to the point where it creates shame, because then we end up vilifying and demonizing those that, you know, in some cases may have done the wrong things more out of ignorance and lack of curiosity and lack of empathy than because of any malice. And maybe that's my naivety, as I always look for the best in people. So I'm always hoping that, you know, we can have some dialogue about why something has happened. So, you know, that notion of curiosity, I think, is huge. And getting people, to ask questions about why is the system like this. So when we talk about systemic racism or systemic bias, it's the curious minds that are going to pick that up more than old people like me who have adapted to it and actually become, I would like to say integrated, but I suspect I've become assimilated into that system myself, because I learned at an early age that was the way to survive. And I think we're now raising children in an environment where it's a bit safer and they can question those things and they don't have to assimilate to survive. That's what we need to do as parents and as community leaders.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, some of the things you mentioned there, school uniforms, Meng's mentioned that before, they can perpetuate some of the stereotypes. I'd love to see schools go to different religious places and learn about different religions. I'm lucky my own son went and did some prayer the other day with one of his friends' family who are Hare Krishna. So it can happen through the curiosity, but if it's not, then I think our schools have a role to play. The other structural thing I'd like to see in terms of policies is more equality impact assessments done when policies are introduced into government ministries or education things, which is just a simple thing of actually sitting down and going, you know, does this policy have an equal impact on all the people we serve, or will it have an unconscious bias embedded in it? And you can only do that by going through a sort of a systemic approach.
I think they can go, not just in government, Ingrid. I mean, I think that applies to all institutions, as having the right people around the table and the right lens and the intention to do that, and looking at every policy. It's got a very broad application.
Takes quite a bit of learning though, doesn't it, David? Like you can, that whole thing of, you know, having different people around the table, or I've heard the phrase used, you know, inviting people to a party. You invite people to a party, but not actually party with them, or not actually get them onto the dance floor, because you may not really be, you may not even feel comfortable doing that, and it might take time. So I think, you know, around boards, that when you try to have diverse boards, I mean, it's something we're quite interested in within public sector boards, but I think the same would apply in private sector. You need to not just have the supply of diverse people to be appointable to boards, but you also have to have the boards and the board chairs really have that desired demand, and then know how to happily have someone around the table so they can do what Meng said, which is have a cup of tea as equals in humanity, as opposed to, you know, a board chair and just a board member. Yeah, so, you know, it takes learning, which takes practice.
you touch on leadership there, Richard, of course, and that opens up that whole, where's culture set in an organisation? It's set by the leadership, and
Yeah.
getting the right people in the right place is pretty critical too.
Mm.
If you'll indulge me with one more question. You touched on this, Ingrid. In actual fact, we've got, because we're also watching other platforms coming on this iPad here, we've got a comment here from Jasmine Wilson. Thank you, Jasmine. She said, great point, Ingrid. So that was at 4:42. So whatever you said at 4:42, Ingrid, great point. My question is, how will we measure the impact? How will you know you've been successful?
It's not difficult, I suppose. Nothing in the paper. That's a good start. No reports coming out of anyone to say that the organisation or the institution is racist. People are feeling included, that organisations have created the environment for people to participate in communities. Less complaints at the Human Rights Commission and the NetSafe would be some measurements. It doesn't have to be complicated, but there would be some. There you go. Someone else might have some other ideas.
I think it depends, what are we measuring? And I think a sense of belonging is probably a good starting point. The other one, and I risk being political here, is that I firmly believe that, equality of outcome is really important. I've heard people and other political parties talk about equality of opportunity, but rationally, if you take that logic through, communities who have equality of opportunity will be represented in the outcomes as well. So when we see, wealth equality, political equality, leadership equality, equality in the private sector, I think they'll be a very good indicator that we've got something right. And until we see that, we've got something wrong.
Great point. Maybe it would even be, the nature and presence of certain institutions and parts of things like government, whether that's like me or the sort of role that Meng has in terms of HRC, the prominence in which we have to exist, which is a kind of a indirect measure of where things are at with society. So a long time ago, Meng, your role would have been called the Race Relations Conciliator, I think. I think there was a particular name which straight off suggests that there was something to reconcile, that there was something broken that needed to be fixed. And it's much better now. It's got more teeth. And Ministry for Ethnic Communities, that's reasonably optimistic. But even Race Relations Day, Race Relations Week, because I'm not that familiar with this week in our calendar, but I do know from when I was growing up, I used to think of that with a negative connotation, that it was trying to fix something. And really we're talking about race relationships, we're talking about community relationships. And so I think there'll be subtle things, but there'll be the sorts of things that Ingrid and Meng have pointed out as well.
All the questions you had for now. Okay, we are going to thank you so much for the answers. I know these questions were a little bit confusing from my end, but I really appreciate each one of you answering it, taking your time out for that. We will be joining you all in the second part, but right now we have some exciting things that I would want Ashcon to take over and talk about. Yep, all yours.
Am I in here? Where would you like me to stand? Over here, over there, over there, over here.
Sorry, guys, we have two cameras that
two cameras.
Lux is trying to tell us to go to.
All right. All right. Can you see me? Okay, hey, Max and Renisha, thank you very much. And can I get a very big thank you to our lovely guests, Professor David Murdoch, Commissioner Meng Foon, Mr. Richard Foy, and the Honourable MP Ingrid Leary. Thank you very much. A very big clap, guys, a very big clap. What's that, sorry, Max?
We've got a round two.
We do have a
after
round
this
two.
segment.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I'm looking forward to it very much. Are you excited about it?
I'm just scared in case the guest panelists disappear.
Oh,
I think this is
yeah,
it.
guys,
No,
please stay.
please
Don't
stay.
go anywhere, or grab a cup of tea while you can, because right now we're going to go for a lovely wee break. And you know what we're going to do during this break? We are going to do probably one of the most exciting things we've ever done for Race Relations Week. Well, I like music, and the bro Peter here. Can you see Peter? Peter, are you in the shot?
I am now.
Most excellent. Also loves music and has produced music from, and has performed music all around the world. And you've toured a total of how many countries?
52.
52 countries.
A couple of them, yeah.
Over how many years? 3 decades? 2 decades?
3.
Yeah. And so you are heavily involved in creating, producing, performing music of all sorts. And now you have done something really special for us. Do you want to tell us about what you've done for everybody to enjoy, Peter?
Probably one of the biggest things I've done is become an executive committee member of the Dunedin Multiethnic Council. Because without them, this song we're about to play very soon wouldn't happen. And also like to thank my mother, who did the karakia for the opening of this event. Misa Emma Kesha, who was one of the first ones that started the Dunedin Multi-Ethnic Council 26 years ago, I think. 35. Sorry, but we won't get. But yeah. So
hang on, Peter. Hang on. Are you telling me that you have created a song for us?
Yes, I have.
You have?
Yeah.
All right. And now you created it from scratch.
Yeah, well, we were asked to create a diversity song. And I mean, because, what I've done and my current job is within music, and I've been in the music industry for so many years, I felt it a great privilege, and it was a passion of mine to write. But getting back to the song, I was thinking of the albatross, which our tāngata whenua call the tōroa. And so I was thinking, like, the albatross comes here to Dunedin. They have nesting grounds here. And they travel thousands of miles around the globe to get here in Dunedin. So I'm just going to read out the words and that's what I thought of when I wrote the lyrics. So I'll read them out to you anyway. Like the great tōroa, we have traversed great distances across the seas to be here in Aotearoa, to live in peace and harmony. We come from lands far and wide, joined in Otepoti in the land of the long white cloud. Black, white, yellow, red, we come together all as one. It's okay to be yourself. Don't forget where you're from. Let all nations know, the home of the tōroa, its feather a sign, the world will be as one. We come from lands far and wide, joined in Otepoti in the land of the long white cloud. So the other lyrics I came up with, and I thought it was appropriate for our ethnic groups represented in this song. So just to tie it up, the first verse is in Tamil, and the second verse is in Samoan, and our chorus is in Māori, and then it goes verse 2, which is in Fijian, and the next verse is in Mandarin. Then we do another chorus in Māori, and then we have verse 3, which is in Arabic, and verse 4 is in Indian. And so I've got a couple of the performers that sung on this song and are in the video. But just to finish off, all our performers came from high schools around Dunedin. So it was quite it was an event within an event, just putting it together and interviewing everyone. and people were ready to come along. I had Samoan boys and Tongan boys, some Kings, and can't do it. They were in lockdown or they were in isolation. So it was quite it was a bit of a mission to complete, but we've done it, and I'm really, really happy, and I'm really thankful to the parents and who supported their children, and we've got a couple of them here, so that's probably enough from me. Well, let's have a chat to some of the performers, shall we? So can you see these two beside me? Beside me, we've got Nicole and Thanuja. So I'm going to hand it over to Nicole for a minute, and you can tell us what your experience was like making this song.
All right. Well, pretty much I was asked if I was interested to do the song through my high school music teacher, saying that they wanted an Indian singer. You're Indian, you sing. It all adds up. So yeah, no, I went along, and the entire thing was a lot of fun. I did the Indian vocals, as Peter mentioned, and I also did a couple of instruments to add to the instrumentation and the layers of the song, both of which was really fun and enjoyable. I think it's really cool. As you're doing it, you're able to not only express your own culture and have fun doing it, but you're able to read the lyrics not only of the song's meaning, but through all the other languages, and you get to experience and familiarize yourself with all of that. So yeah, no, it's just really cool to be a part of, and I'm glad to have been able to do that.
And Nicole, what were those other instruments you played in the song?
Right, so I have a whole array I could have chosen from, but I decided to use my trombone and my baritone saxophone.
Thank you very much. And Thanuja, can you tell us your experience in recording this song?
Hi. Yeah, it was a really fun experience. And since I've had like some other experience in like a recording studio, I think it was really comfortable in that space, and it was great to like contribute something that promotes diversity, because I think that's really important. So yeah.
And apparently you've now got a recording studio in your room.
Oh. It's not so much of a studio, just like just a microphone and a phone. Yeah.
That's all you need to start off with, dear. That's all you need. Hey, we also we had a rapper in the song. This is Ashkon's eldest son. So you introduce yourself and you tell us a bit about your experience with the song.
Hi, I'm Roshan, and I'm not very fluent in Farsi, so it's quite hard for me to do it. I haven't really had any experience with it, to be honest, so it's quite new, but I did enjoy it a lot.
That's great. As you can see, you don't need experience to make music. And I think the really great thing what I love about the arts is the best music and the best art is when you don't think. So there wasn't a lot of thinking done in this, apart from the technical side. But it was more, music's a great thing, you know, bringing people together. And there's a lot of aroha and love in it anyway, even just the making and creating of it. I come from a family of artists. My mother, who was on before, did the karakia as a master weaver. So we were all brought up around music and weaving and the arts. So with these three beside me, it was definitely a pleasure, because I was doing my art and they got to contribute and create things. And you know, with the melody in there, I tried to keep it open so our youth could actually bring in their own melodies and bring in their own things. But has anyone got anything else they'd like to say? Have we got any questions for anyone sitting in here? No? Okay then. Oh, well, here it is, the diversity song.
Put
Arkansanim, His Fagnedorim, Hukorea Yexami, Theosophy Chiniim, Hindi Mindi Mauriim, Dige Chore Nandarim, Mashborim Boham Boshim, Boham Diga Huboshim.
Asau savai samo.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. We enjoyed as much as we enjoyed making it. So thank you once again to the Dunedin Multi-Ethnic Council and all our families that were involved. And we'd like to carry on our discussion. I'd like to hand it back to Max and Ranisha. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Peter. My father's from Germany, and he always says it's the sound that makes the music. And that was beautiful. Question 2 for our esteemed VIP guest panelists. You each hold a leadership position in your institution. What steps and procedures or policies are in place to address and prevent issues related to discrimination and racism in your organizations? Either one of you can opt to go first, or I'll just pick on someone. Richard, you're smiling.
Oh.
Would you like to go? Would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. You know, my ministry is a relatively new ministry. It's been around since the 1st of July 2021. So I still think it's in a process of becoming and kind of growing up, but almost by not by luck. I suppose it has been by previous practice and previous sort of you know, legacy of the ministry. It kind of inherently has a very diverse population of staff, but I don't think that alone makes us the type of organisation that you're talking about in terms of, you know, mitigating discriminatory or racist structures, because just having different faces around the table or in the lunchroom doesn't necessarily change what's going on inside our heads. I think it's a big component of that, because already there's difference and there's diversity, but it's that kind of organizational culture that we create that really brings out, you know, the value in that diversity. And it's not just something I was talking before about, you know, you can invite people to a board table, but unless you actually value what they have to say, then they'll probably remain silent. Well, I think the same goes with our sort of organizations, and that you can pepper them with people that seem to be diverse because they might look it or might say it, but if you're not encouraging people to actually be themselves, and, you know, I'll use those terms that I always hate to hear because they seem a bit trite, but, you know, bring your authentic self to work, be your whole self. Some people probably rather that I left bits of myself at home, actually, but it's, so, you know, and that culture is very much leader-led, and I think it was David earlier who was sort of saying, you know, that culture is very much set in terms of the tone from the top, or it can be if you have a very hierarchical kind of organization. So the things that we like to do are very much about showing our staff that it's okay to be yourself, and that although we're part of a very, and I think I'm not speaking out of school here, that you know, I work in a very Anglo, Westminster styled public service, because that's the democracy and the sort of constitutional arrangements we have. But we, you know, operate within a country where we have fertility, and so we have, you know, we should be thinking about what a tikanga-based, you know, approach to living in New Zealand is like, and a public service. So, you know, we incorporate lots of tikanga Māori into our environment, but we're actually having to learn how to bring in lots of other different types of cultures into our working environments, and not, hopefully not just for, you know, festivals and sort of cultural events, but actually part of the way in which we interact and deal with each other. But I personally think it's largely down to the leadership who set the tone from the top. And for my mind, it's, again, I'll just go back to what Ingrid said around that curiosity, is that you want your leaders to exhibit that sort of curiosity and to demonstrate it through not just cultural cultural diversity, but cultural appreciation, actually being curious about others in the workplace, where they come from, their whakapapa. And, you know, that's I think takes us a long way into real appreciation and valuing of difference. And to make sure that you call, a term I heard today, instead of calling out and creating shame, why don't you call in and highlight great behavior, good behavior, and that, you know, hopefully takes away from the fear that some people have of maybe behaving, looking and sounding and appearing different, because in the end, many of us just want to feel like we're part of that crowd.
Thank you very much, Richard. Meng, I see that you've changed your Zoom background.
Yeah, several times, Max. No, I didn't hear the question.
Okay, I'll repeat that. You each hold a leadership position in your institution. What steps and procedures or policies are in place to address and prevent issues related to discrimination and racism in your institution?
Look, the main thing is encouraging education, encouraging good behavior, encouraging good guidelines to deal with bad behavior. But also, not only that, we need to tell good stories, celebrate our stories, celebrate each other, encourage everybody to have a space in Aotearoa. It's actually creating the environment I was talking about, so that we can have our culture, we can have the language that you believe in, the religion that you believe in, your workspace that is inclusive, and you're participating, and you're part of not only going to the party or dancing at the party, but you're also part of organizing the party.
Yeah,
Hey,
yes.
Richard. And
Yep.
so that's the thing, you see, and probably the workplace and structural organizations are the hardest. And there's a lot of work to be done in there, but little and often. You know, I admire the Mirror on Society at Otago University. And if it's successful, let it carry on, you know, because we need more doctors and professional medical person in the various ethnic, rural, refugee, Maori, Pacific in our community. Organizations need to reflect society in themselves. But one of the big issues is the big sort of no to actually talk about. I just want to bring it up. Is actually discrimination between ourselves. What I mean is like between Chinese people. They come at different times. They speak different dialects. They have different wealth. I mean, I remember the kids coming from Hong Kong. They were driving Mercedes and BMWs to school, and it made the headlines because we were still on bicycles and Ford Escorts. And so, you know, there's that sort of stuff in between us, that we have discriminatory between us. I know that. I know that there's tensions between different religions of people coming from the same country. They could, yeah. It's just we need to chat about that and say that we're actually in New Zealand now. And one of the interesting things in terms of the new immigration policies is which they actually had a drop box to say, look, New Zealand is a democracy. It has the Treaty of Waitangi as its foundation. We do have LGBTQI. You can practice your religion, freedom of religion practices. You can't coerce your kids or your children in terms of conversion therapy. You can't change them from, if they already want to be a girl, you can't change them back into a female forcibly. You can't cut off their bits and pieces just because you have your cultural things. You can't smack your kids anymore. Those sort of things, you know. So just to say, is this the country I want to come to? Or do I want to go to another country which has the values that actually align with my values? That would actually create people that are informed of what they're actually going into. So those are some of the little bits and pieces that we're working on in terms of creating harmonious communities going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vice Chancellor, would you like to offer an opinion here?
Yes, thank you. And I get, you know, pretty clearly I come from those big conservative structural organisations that have been historically quite resistant to change. And, you know, there are big challenges. And a lot of it is, a lot of the key initiatives have been mentioned. I mean, about leadership, I talk about that a lot because it really does set the tone. And a university is so complex, you know, it can't be run by command and control. It needs a distributed leadership. You need to have that kind of culture throughout, that it comes from the leadership. But I would just some of the points already made. I mean, creating a safe environment. I mean, that comes from, you know, back to that again for our staff and our students, and that comes in many facets. The good examples Meng said, and often it's just it's not that people. Often it's just people haven't thought, and actually to see some examples and shift them can be really, really meaningful and impactful. And Meng, thank you for mentioning the mirror on society. I think it's something we are, you know, immensely proud of as a university. And again, Ingrid, it's focused on outcomes. Initiative focused on the outcomes, in this case, really based around health professionals, but it could extend to any profession actually. And it responds to the idea of social accountability. We're responsible to the country, responsible to the community, responsible for the workforce, and that the evidence for that, for the benefits from having that mirroring, if you use that word, society, and anticipating the future makeup of our society is absolutely critical. If we keep doing what we have been doing for years, we would never catch up. It was just never going to happen. And so these changes are seen as being fairly bold, and I think in the context of what universities have done, that clearly is bold, but the outcomes have been so clear, so clear. One of the important aspects of this is actually the narrative doesn't come easily to everyone, and so there needs to be a lot of time spent into just outlining exactly why we're doing what we're doing, and that's been a critical part of what we've done.
Thank you. Ingrid, do you have any comments to share with us?
Yeah, sure. First, I just want to say thanks for the song. It was absolutely incredible, and we've been all messaging each other in the panel, talking about TikTok and Instagram and the news and radio stations, and it's very exciting. So I think that song's got a big future. It's a great song and the singing is amazing. I thought I'd talk about where I sit in terms of two different parcels, if you like. One is Parliament and one is the Labour Party. I think they're both at different parts of their journey. So for Parliament, again, it's a Westminster structure. It's very patriarchal, very colonial. But I think that the safeguard really is around MMP, because we know that democracy doesn't work for minorities. So it's really important that we've got that list process in order to be able to get diversity in terms of ethnicity, in terms of sexuality to a certain degree. But the one we haven't actually cracked at all is disability. So I can think of one MP who identifies as having a disability rather than being disabled, but we don't have somebody who identifies as being disabled. So we've got a lot of work to do. In terms of our political party, I think that the structures that we have is we have caucuses, which is collective groups within our larger caucus of 65. So we've got Pacifica, we've got Māori, we've got the Ethnic Caucus, we've got the Rainbow Caucus. I think all of them are, because of the numbers that we have at the moment, are the biggest caucuses that we've ever had for those groups. But there's still work to do, and you'll see, the intersectionality of some of the issues. Like you've got Ethnic Caucus, and then if you look at the gender pay gap, and you look at some of the statistics that are floating around, women have got, Pacifica women are something like 27.6% behind Pākehā men in the gender pay gap, but nobody's actually talking about Indian women and Chinese women who are even worse off. So there's still a ways to go around the Ethnic Caucus and around getting the ethnic voice into political parties. There's also gender again. Labor's worked really hard. That's why we've got 50-50 for 2020. We've got 50% of women in I think we've got 55% actually now in Parliament, and our constitution reflects that, and it's been from the ground up through the political process. Where we have a lot of work to do, and work's undergoing at the moment, is around Māori in our constitution as a political party, and we haven't started the conversation yet really around disability and around ethnicity. So when those conversations happen, and when we see that come up through our party politics and our party constitution, that will again translate into the kind of progress that we can make both politically at Parliament, but also within the construct of Parliament, because it's still such a colonial, Pākehā, very paternalistic environment, the whole way that it's set up. So my call for action, if you like, is that the only way to change that is to get involved. So young people, old people, anybody who's ever thought about getting involved politically, it doesn't matter which political party you gravitate to. The one thing that I love more than my own one is democracy, and democracy doesn't work for minorities, but it can work under MMP, or it can work if you get a seat at the important tables in those processes. And it's not going to happen by accident. So it has to happen through succession planning. I sit on Ethnic Caucus, and I'm the only one on Ethnic Caucus for the whole of Te Waipounamu. And my dream, by the time I leave, is I would love to see somebody from an ethnic minority, because I'm Dutch by descent. I would like to see somebody who experiences the negative side of racism that I haven't experienced. So somebody from the ethnic communities and somebody from the Pacifica communities. I would love to see, two MPs at least from the South Island be sitting at the table. At the moment, we don't have anyone, so I feel like I'm a placeholder. So that's my call to action for anybody, particularly our young people. If you are politically interested, get involved with a political party. It doesn't matter which one. You'll find the one that aligns with your values. Start volunteering, start getting interested. And we need to have civics in school as well. That's the other big one. We've got to have civics in school. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Richard, you have your hand up. Go, Richard.
Oh yeah, just really to sort of further that, what Ingrid just shared, but also the connecting back to something that Meng was talking about around reflecting or being a mirror of the communities we serve. Because I'm part of a New Zealand public service, and we often use that term, which is we want to or we need to reflect the communities that we serve. And Ingrid was talking about how democracy is it's imperfect, but MMP is better, and it kind of makes me think of a couple of things, which is to do all this we need friends, so we need advocates and we need friends. So Ingrid, you may be what I would say is Pākehā, but you actually are from one of our mandated communities, because Continental European is technically part of the set of ethnic communities that my ministry actually is meant to advocate for and look after. And so you're actually in a great position to be a friend, an advocate, as you have been by the sounds of things. But that reflecting the communities we serve, I think, isn't just in terms of sheer numbers, but I think it's also needs to be thought about in terms of the power structures and the hierarchies. So it's kind of no good if, for example, I'll just use some stats that I've seen around New Zealand public service workforce. If all the Asians, like myself, are doing the traditional stereotypical Asian roles and they're not in managerial or leadership positions. So this is stuff that we have to be mindful of within our ministry, but within the wider public service that I operate in. And it sometimes takes other people to call these things out, or for research and studies to help us see where those differences need to be made. And I remember Dr. Jared Haar from Auckland University Technology, AUT, he did some research around ethnic pay differences in the New Zealand public service, and I got interviewed for that. And I guess it wasn't until that I was part of that interview process and he talked to me and he said, "Oh, Richard, there's actually statistically a good chance that you're paid less than your Pākehā male colleagues." And I was just blown away by that. And I was like, no, really? Whilst actually, I was kind of brought up just to be happy with what I got. And so again, it's part of that assimilated culture that you've taken on board in order to adapt and operate within a particular system. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Vice Chancellor, you very recently put out a statement, and can I just say how transparent you were and how much we appreciated the transparency with which you and how delicately you handled a very, well, in itself, delicate situation. Can I ask you a question about how long do you think it will take before we start seeing some changes implemented at the University of Otago, and to begin implementing that competent cultural structure?
Thanks, Max. It's again, I mentioned that before. This was a review that highlighted an issue, and it's not necessarily that we're unusual as an institution or unusual. It's just come up. I mean, this is clearly an issue that's been around, and it was very important. It was commented at how brave it was to be transparent. Well, I actually don't think it was. It was just to use the power of my privilege of my role to do the right thing. Those that raised the allegations were very brave. And maybe I was bold, but I just think it was doing the right thing. In terms of the activity, hopefully we'll see some changes fairly soon. But it is actually there is a raft of changes happen. I think it'd be it would be naive to think it's just one fix or one activity. It is actually a number of activities, and it's looking at systems as well. I mean, it's a system problem. There's some major system problems which you need to look at, and some will take longer than others to fix. And it's also, we're doing a lot of amazingly good stuff, and so it's actually not acknowledging we still have work to do, but also acknowledging where we have done well, and then just striving to do better. So I guess in answer to your question, hopefully soon, but it will be changes for a period of time that to be sustained, and that's the intention. Very clearly, we're wanting to walk the walk. So this will take the time it needs to take, but we also know the need to see action. So it's a combat and dealing with that tension. There'll be a number of activities.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Manisha, I have another question, and it relates to the fact that Otago is a resettlement city for our refugees. Do you feel that's been answered, or do you want to raise that question?
I think maybe Ingrid can speak to that better, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's been, 792 refugees, I think, since in the last 5 years. Was there a specific question? Sorry, I cut you off.
Do you want to, or shall I? Okay. Well, okay. Ingrid, it's me. It's so the question is, given that Otago is a resettlement city for our refugees and migrants and international students, what initiatives do the government or local electorate and council have in place, and what do they prioritise to make our ethnic communities feel safe and feel that they belong?
Yeah, it's a really big question.
It is.
And first of all, I think we need to acknowledge the really excellent work that the city has done in putting its arms out. The initiative came from people seeing refugees overseas, seeing homelessness, and actually community members who initiated this saying, what can we do to open our doors and our hearts to people who need somewhere to settle? So it came from a very good place. And I think, Dunedin has done very, very well. And the fact that it came from the community was a good solid starting point. And inevitably, when there are cultural differences, there are going to be challenges as well, and that's part of the journey. So I know that there have been groups set up to look at what could be done proactively, and my sense is that some of those groups have continued, but some of them have also dropped by the wayside. And so, there's an opportunity after what happened with the hijab case to go back and look at where those conversations have been with groups, community groups from schools, which have been made up of all sorts of members of the community, to be able to proactively initiate ideas to help guide the schools or guide the city forward on this journey. So I think there was some proactivity. The Red Cross have done an extraordinary job. The volunteers are amazing, and many of the volunteers have kept those relationships with those families. And I think that's where the gold is it's the volunteers and their relationships with families that have been really good. Where I see some issues are around more structural and systemic, looking at when people come into New Zealand, what are their expectations? How much information overload do they have when they arrive in the Mangere Resettlement Centre? Is it is it too much information too quickly? And does it set up false expectations for what the reality might be like when they come to a different climate and a different housing situation? We need to look at the stock of housing that's available, because some former refugee families have very large families, and yet the housing supply in Dunedin is not necessarily suited for that. And we need to look at where different ethnic communities have settled, because there might be different cities in New Zealand that are more amenable to different communities, or that they may want to move to. And certainly I'm aware through our own office that a number of former refugees have moved away from Dunedin for various reasons. So I think we could take stock and look at some of those issues on a more systemic level. But as far as there's one other point I'd make about that, is I've had many people come to me who want to do things with former refugee communities or with mana whenua, and they're waiting for the perfect opportunity or for something to be set up. And I just get a sense sometimes that people lack confidence. And I think Meng's advice of having a cup of tea is a fantastic takeaway. Is, you know, there is no time that is too soon to start the conversation. So rather than waiting for everything to be set up or wondering how to do something appropriately, it's just reach out and have a cup of tea and start the conversation and co-create things together, and they'll always be more successful. So those are just some of my kind of ideas at the moment. Don't know if that answered the question.
No, it did. Thank you. Are there any other takeaway points? I direct this to all members of the panel. So thank you for sharing that, Ingrid, because it's nice to be able to walk away from a discussion with some takeaway points. So Richard and Meng and David, what are your takeaway points from this discussion?
Having a cup of tea is a good thing. And I'd mean that in all seriousness, because if that's the medium that by which we build trust, and then we have relationships, build relationships with people, and continue to nurture those relationships, then that is worth more than any number of YouTube channels or Instagram posts or emails. And if we do that in what I would call peacetime, then when we really need to rely on those relationships, they will be there. And, COVID-19 is a good example of how we've had to scramble around with different communities and community groups and, some of them ethnic communities, in order to help those which are the most marginalized and vulnerable in our society. And you can't wait until a crisis. You need to start building that now. And if we start building those things now, it absolutely creates the stronger New Zealand that we want to be part of. And I think there was that whole idea of getting back to the original theme around collective action and interwoven communities. There are communities where people can rely upon each other. And people tend to do that during crisis, but the longer that these crises go on, it seems to be harder to rely upon each other. And I think that's what, real community responsibility and maybe social accountability is our ability to rely upon each other and look after one another. So lots of cups of tea, as Meng said.
Thank you. Vice Chancellor or Commissioner, final thoughts?
I was going to say a cup of tea as well. So, but I think what we're seeing there is the culture and its emphasis on creating the right culture, and the cup of tea is part of that. Getting the right leadership is part of that. Creating a safe space is part of that. So, and you can't buy a culture. You can't get someone to come and install it or tell you how to do it. It's really it comes from within. It comes from the right people in the right place and good leadership. So, but the cup of tea is absolutely right. And there's science behind that, Meng. There's good science behind that.
Thank you very much, team. We just want to acknowledge the ethnic community for holding this event, and acknowledge my panelists and acknowledge all the people that are involved. I think the good thing that's come out of this in the last few years is that we're actually having a conversation about racism, as much as it has been a difficult subject, but it seems to be rolling off our tongues now. And I'm pleased that more people are participating, engaging, calling out, calling in, holding people to account. And so it takes all of us to actually do that. I'll say that we're not starting on page one. I think we've made a lot of progress in the last few years in terms of harmonious relationships in New Zealand. And the more that we become aware of each other and the more education that we can share with each other, the better our nation will be. So, tēnei te mihi kia koutou te pōnei.
Kia ora, thank you so much. I had one last final question for everyone on the panel today. And this is me stepping outside of my role at Dunedin Multiethnic Council and speaking as a young person that I am. Like Max has mentioned before, that there was meant to be a youth panel who would be parallel to the VIP panel, but they unfortunately couldn't make it today in that sphere as well. So I am a 20-year-old Fijian Indian girl who migrated to New Zealand in 2014. In 2016, in my high school, I was bullied because of the color of my skin and mocked because of the accent that I had, which has led me to do the work that I do in the community and study what I do today. So I study politics at the University of Otago, as well as I work with an ethnic-specific cultural competent organization that supports victims of domestic violence, let's say survivors of domestic violence, actually. What is one thing that I can take home today as a young person and as someone who comes from all this experience in life, that will make me feel better and hope that there's a future that I can look forward to in New Zealand?
I would say be bold and be involved, and really congratulations. Encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. We just need more young people, more young voices, and just to really keep at it. It is really important.
I say find yourself, be proud of your roots, of where you come from. Hold on to all the treasures that your many generations have given you, to the beautiful person that you are, or the beautiful young people that are in our country. I think find allies, find friends that are of similar thinking, because who you surround yourself with is going to project the positive person and allow your fullness to participate in community. So find some good mates.
Yeah, if I can share, my children are Rotuman, and my oldest son used to get racially profiled when he went to the supermarket, and the other kids didn't. They would check his bags and things, and he was probably the only one that wasn't actually shoplifting. So go figure. I think you're well on your way. You found the difference that you want to make in the world. My very strong, I guess, reflection, somebody mentioned it earlier, was around, I think it was Richard, talking about, walking the talk. I think these values start at home, and all of us, the kindness that we show, the way that we conduct our relationships within our families, within our wider community, are absolutely indicative of the impact, the ripple effect that we have out in the bigger world. So I think whether somebody's in a leadership position or in an ethnic community or in a non-ethnic community, being really aware of our own behaviours and how we relate to other people is the starting point, and then just continuing that as much as we can. And we'll fail because we're human, but starting at home and having those cups of tea. So I feel very optimistic when I see young people like you doing the work that you're doing, because I think you have found the difference that you want to make in the world. And bullying is a terrible issue in New Zealand, and I will guarantee, I'm not trying to diminish the experience you've had, but people will always find a reason to bully other people, whether it's racism, whether it's their sexuality, whether it's because they're a woman, whatever it is. And we need to stop all bullying, and racism is part of it.
And I was going to say, you asked before what hope could be given to you, and I would just say that you are that hope, and just keep being that hope by doing the sorts of things that you are brave and courageous enough to do, and encourage others to do. And I think it was David who said that youth are kind of very much the inspiration. Don't forget about us old people. We might be able to help you as well. and especially those that have gone before and had to deal with these types of things that you're dealing with still, which is still very sad.
Kia ora. Thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed each one of your response, and I commend you for speaking on this panel and answering questions that at times are uncomfortable as much as we don't want to admit it. But thank you each one of you for coming in today. Yeah, it's about, I pass the task back to Ashcon to end, but before that, can I just say the diversity song is a very first of its kind, done by Dunedin Multiethnic Council. And I know Lux and Peter and Ashcon have been behind it, and they've been so excited about it. So I just want to say a big shout out to my team. I am super, super proud of how far we have come with planning and WhatsApp at the middle of the night. So thank you, each one of you. Ashcon, all yours.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Renisha, and thank you very much, Max. And how lovely it has been to have all of you here today. Again, rehashing on our lovely guests, Professor David Murdoch, Vice Chancellor at the University of Otago, Commissioner Meng Foon, Race Relations Commissioner, Mr. David Foy, Deputy Chief Exec and Minister of Ethnic Communities, and the Honourable Ingrid Leary, MP for Dunedin South. Once again, kia ora, and thank you very much for your time. It is deeply appreciated. We all had a blast enjoying everything you guys all had to say. And before I let you guys go, I wanted to share a wee something from my background. I myself, I am Persian and a member of the Baha'i International Global Community. Now, on the note I'd like to finish on is something from the Baha'i writings, which touches on the unity and the oneness of mankind. I don't have it by memory, so I'm going to paraphrase. Basically, what it says is that we are all waves of one ocean, yeah, flowers of one garden, fruits of one tree, yeah. And there's more. Well, if I were to make things up, I could say all slices of one pizza or pieces of one cake. It's nearly dinner time because my mind's on food. Right. So yeah, and that all in all is that, that all the different components of mankind, all the different peoples, and all this lush, extremely lush diversity, right, is similar to all the different body parts in the human body, right? If one part is sore, the other part of my body can't say, well, I'm just going to ignore that over here is sore because it's got nothing to do with me up here. No, it's going to affect this part. If my head is sore, it's going to affect my entire body. If my toe is sore, it's going to affect our entire body. If one country in the world, for example, let's say Ukraine or whatever's a hot topic in the news, if one part of the world is in trouble, we all feel it. We're all affected. So indeed, we are all part of one entity, the human family on planet Earth. It is floating rock in space that we've all got to figure out what we're up to together and trying to sort things out. So on that note, once again, thank you very much, our dear guests. But David, I understand that you have a special prayer that you guys over at the Ministry of Ethnic Communities can share for us. Would you like to close that for us? Close with
So did you mean me, Richard?
Yes, Richard, sorry. Sorry, everyone. David.
Well, I can close with a karakia. I didn't actually have a special prayer. We don't sort of have one of those around here, but I'm happy to close with karakia. Ki te mutunga o tō tātou noho, te kua, te wairua, ki rere ki ngā tōmata, hai arere i a tātou mahi me tā tātou whai i ngā tikanga a rātou mā. Kia mau, kia ita, kia kore ai e naro, kia pupuri, kia whakamoa, kia tina, huie taike.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you ever so much. Now, before I let you guys go, I have to do a very big thank you to the Kotahi Taka Trust. Now, we have previously partnered with Kotahi Taka Trust for the closing ceremony of Race Relations Week. Unfortunately, Noeline Hung, the chair of Kotahi Taki Trust, is unable to join us today because of teaching commitments at varsity. Therefore, she has sent us this message to share with you. The Kotahitaka Trust is delighted to add more pages to the We Are Otepoti book kept at Toitu. This book is a collaboration with the Dunedin Multiethnic Council as a special virtual project to commemorate Race Relations Week. First presented during Race Relations Week at Toitu Settlers Museum in 2022, it contains entries from numerous groups around Otepoti in hard copy and online at the DMAC website. It is a snapshot of who we are as a community, held for safekeeping and display at Toitu. It is a wonderful opportunity to tell the story of our diversity, exploring attitudes and contributions to the community. This year, we are delighted to have 3 new entries from Dunedin Schools, namely Otago Girls High School, Kaikorai Valley College, and Green Island School. Please make time to read them. They are thoughtful and beautifully presented. They show our young people brimming with integrity, respect, the joy of friends and family, and most of all, Aotearoa New Zealand, as we all want it to be, a safe home for all to enjoy. We believe this book records the community of Otepoti Dunedin and indeed New Zealand. Everyone is welcome to contribute. Everyone is recognized and valued. Everyone is included. We thank Toitu for the stewardship of this treasure, and the Trust thanks DMAC for their collaboration. We thank Otago Girls High School, Kaikorai Valley College, and Green Island School. We thank everyone who has already contributed their story. This record will be enjoyed and added to in the future as we seek more pages over the next few years and hand on the project to younger ones. So that is from our lovely chair of Kotahitaki, Noilene Hung. Thank you, Noilene. Big clap for Noilene, everyone. Big clap. All right. We have done our closing acknowledgements. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. It's been a